Howdy doody, good folks of YouTube. Welcome back to Hello Michigan Farms. The inevitable has happened. Yesterday, mid-afternoon, the Joe Rogan experience with a special guest, Andrew Wilson, dropped. And I think like a lot of us, I was a little taken back at first. But it was really good and really exciting. I spent my entire evening consuming it. So, we're going to talk about that today because I took a bunch of notes on it. And yeah, it was good. It was not what I was expecting, at least for like the first almost hour, but definitely the first 10 minutes. And I don't know if that was just to lure people into watching it or what, but you know, it started off chill, and really the entire thing was chill, so nice to see Joe finally meet his new best friend. And by the end of it, Joe does admit that he's been watching a lot of Andrew and enjoys the content, so not surprised to hear that. A little surprised that he's been watching for a long time, but not too surprised. So, the whole thing kicks off with them poking fun at Candace Owens, which is hilarious. And, which the really funny thing about that is that Candace has been doing the murder mystery of Charlie Kirk. And, as we really get into this podcast, it turns into Joe Rogan's murder mystery of that guy in Minnesota, Preddy. And ultimately, I think this is why Joe has Andrew on the podcast at this time. Because he wants to talk about guns, and he wants to talk about his take on the Preddy situation, which involves this firearm that he believes potentially discharged on its own. And I think he wants Andrew's take on, among many other things, but I think mainly the gun thing. But back from the beginning, they laugh about Candace because, yeah, she's an idiot. One of these mainstream media people that now has clout in the underground media world. And her murder mystery of Charlie Kirk is basically laughable. But then they go on to talk about fucking alchemy and CERN particle hadron colliders, and Joe doesn't really seem like he's on board with the idea that the government has their own particle colliders, but Andrew seems pretty convinced. So and there they go on. Oh, well, yeah, the DNR. Andrew talks about the DNR and how much people in Michigan hate them, but they talk about pheasants and stuff, but the list of reasons that people hate the DNR is far longer than just pheasants. In Michigan, the DNR actually have more authority than the police as far as search and seizures in your home are concerned. So that's probably the biggest issue and complaint. They talk about Bigfoot hunters. They talk about well, Nick Shirley's name is mentioned, and really they go into a big conversation about how convenient it is that this organic protest, which is really a riot, popped up as soon as all of this fraud has been uncovered. Which I think for the regular people keeping track of the thread, that's pretty much the summarization. I guess, I don't know if they talked about it, but I wanted to talk about it the Border Patrol. Oh, the Border Patrol was involved in this Preddy incident, which I really didn't consume any content on the Preddy situation until they talked about it, and they talked about it at length. But Border Patrol, I think, was who was involved in this, and from what I've seen on YouTube, Border Patrol has been completely out of line, far worse than ICE has been, and interesting how the narrative continues. But liberals being pro Second Amendment, this is the new theme, which is making conservatives laugh. My buddy told me that there's somebody in Ann Arbor was asking where the least MAGA place to get a gun is, which that'd be Ipsy Tucky. They talk about Waltz. They talk about Joe's security gig back in the day, him and his Taekwondo buddies, which is Joe leading into his justification and understanding for police force and why cops stick together the way they do. You know, they're facing domestic terrorists, which is part of the reason why the local police municipalities are not helping ICE, because they don't really know how to handle this stuff. I think it goes deeper than that, but yeah, guns seem to be the main reason Andrew was on the show. I thought at this point Andrew really made the best point that he had made yet on the podcast, because basically it was just them talking as friends or getting to know each other, and about halfway through, over an hour in, Andrew calls Joe out for using rhetoric, for saying something that's just kind of the main, this talking point. And then he makes the point that even if the murder was unjustified, the deportations aren't going to end. Like, you're not going to stop. Like, this is what we all voted for. And how the fraud for the illegals is really just suicidal empathy. Joe was bringing up, what's that guy's name? Gad Sad or something like that. And I've heard Andrew use the reference also, the terminology suicidal empathy. Yeah, I guess it started getting pretty deep from there. Talking about how the left are weaponizing the mentally ill. The sham of psychology they talk about. And then they finally, religion is finally brought up. And Andrew makes the point that at this day and age, how we're really defining who is conservative and who isn't really begins with the framework of religion. Dun 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 dun. Oh, today's show got way more serious than yesterday's. Shout out to everybody that tuned in yesterday. And again tomorrow. Oh yeah, then they get into Sky Daddy Not Real, which is like, does it really even matter? You know, because Christianity lends to forgiveness, which is something that doesn't exist in the left. And he tells the drunk monk story. Joe claims that these people are just advocating for communism, and then begins to explain capitalism, make his pitch for capitalism, which is, yeah, I mean, basically what's happening here. outside of the spiritual warfare that is the political realm. Oh yeah, then Joe mentions Joffrey from Game of Thrones being like a trust fund baby, and how trust fund babies are the worst people on earth. He says it's like concrete. If you don't do it right, you can't go back and fix it. You can't go back and change it later. Talking about more about fraud, how the natural disaster, like the money that went to help the wildfires is going other places. Joe mentions Gavin Newsom vetoing an audit for what's going on with the homeless, all the money for the homelessness. And then they went there. Because if you were this far into the podcast, you're gonna hear some really weird shit. You thought it was weird in the beginning? That was like the just intro? Nope. They went there. They started talking about the cum warriors of Papua New Guinea, which is really fucking disturbing, and also interesting point Andrew brings up regularly in debates, just to make his points clear that these people are sick. Then they go on and talk more about the Aztecs and noble savages, and just how farmers and society are successful places where savages, you gotta get by in the wild on your own. Finally, the conversation is about 2 hours and 40 minutes. Concludes with the discussion of the power game that is everything they talked about in politics. And then basically flowers, Joe giving his praise to Andrew for what he does, and he did ask a little bit about how he got into it, which is interesting. I've heard in other interviews, but this interview was totally different than any interview I've seen of Andrew Wilson, where people typically jump right into, how did you start doing this? Why do you do this? What's your basis for it? And really talking about the debates and what Andrew does. I really got the feeling like this was just Joe getting to know Andrew, and there definitely is going to be another episode. So it ends with some flowers, and I do have a quote from Andrew Wilson. Oh, when Joe was asking him why he's doing why he does what he does, he said, "I saw my view was not being represented well." I thought that was a real clue into just who he is and why he keeps going on doing what he's doing. So I've enjoyed the debates. I've enjoyed reflecting and learning more about myself from listening to the debates, and formulating more of my own worldview, and just being ready to defend myself. So, another excellent little tea time chat. I tried to move the phone closer so we get a little better volume. Next time I'll try to turn off the humidifier that's giving us the funny audio and all that. And we'll keep it rolling. Check out the shorts. Check out the shirts. Check out that Joe Rogan Andrew Wilson. Let me know what you think of it. Alright, till tomorrow. One love.